Hi, everybody. Charles from GMAT Ninja here. Welcome to a special 2-hour Q&A event. So I'll answer absolutely anything today. Any questions you have about the GMAT, GRE, executive assessment, MBA admissions, if I know anything about it. I'll answer absolutely anything you'd like. Can't promise to answer it well, but I'll do my very best. But hopefully, as you know by now, it's a fundraiser for flood victims in Pakistan. So 33 million people so far have been displaced by the massive, massive flooding in Pakistan. And just for context, we did that massive 24-hour Ukraine fundraiser. The entire population of Ukraine is just over 40 million people. 33 million Pakistanis have been displaced. Absolute massive human tragedy. One of the great guys of the GMAT Club Forum. So if you've been doing any work on reading comprehension over the last 5 years on GMAT Club, you'll see a fellow named Sajjad Ahmad, known as Sajjad 1994 on the forum. He's been our verbal forum moderator for a very, very long time. He is absolutely the energizer bunny of the reading comprehension forum. This guy's made, 10,000 posts, constantly posting questions, constantly getting people motivated. If your scores have improved on reading comprehension, thanks to your work on GMAT Club, you can thank Sajjad. He's one of the great people of the internet. And he brought us this idea to do a fundraiser. So he is in Pakistan. He's in South Punjab near Multan, which is the largest city in that region of Pakistan. And he asked us to do a fundraiser. He's raising as much as he can. And his plan, as I understand it, is to directly help flood victims. He is there on the ground, seeing the human tragedy. And he and some of his friends and colleagues are banding together to help distribute funds, food, whatever families need in his community for help. So much more hands-on than you often see in these fundraisers, where we send a bunch of money to some international organization. Our guy Sajjad, 100% trust him. He's going to give us a full accounting for where all the funds go. So this is your opportunity. You want to help people very, very directly. Sajjad has it going. So this money is going to be incredibly, incredibly useful in a way that you can't even imagine, because it is going to go to use directly. So if anything we say today is helpful at all, there's going to be links in the chat. There's links on GMAT Club. Please donate whatever you can. If you aren't able to donate at this time, we 100% understand. Please ping some friends, have them come join us. Like I said, I'll answer absolutely anything and do my very, very best to be helpful for you guys. And I would love for you to do your best to either donate, help out Sajjad's efforts, or bring in some friends, get some attention on us, and see if some of those guys can donate. All right, as far as structure today, so we're going to go for 2 hours. And if there's more questions after that, I am happy to do more fundraisers next week or keep going or whatever we need to do if there's enough demand for this. If it's raising money and helping out Sajjad's efforts, I am happy to keep going as long as we need to over the next few weeks. Now, we're going to prioritize questions from donors. So hit the super chat, and we've got some of the moderators here who are going to be providing some of those details of how exactly to do that. If you are not familiar with Super Chat, there it is up on the screen right now. Ask a question, hit that Super Chat button. So Nikhil and Sajjad, I believe BB is back there as well. Abhijit might be kicking around, a whole bunch of the team from GMAT Club. They're going to be feeding me questions. So I'm not necessarily going to read them in advance. I'm going to have no idea what's going on. So you're going to get to watch me stumble and fumble through some of these spontaneously, but we will prioritize questions from donors. We have a handful in advance that I'm going to use to kick this off. But basically, these guys are going to be compiling a running list. So questions from the top donors are going to get to the top of the pile. It'll appear on the screen. I will do my very best to answer it. All right. With that, away we go. And let's see. I think we're a few slides ahead. Okay. So I'm going to start with, this is one of the very small handful of questions submitted in advance. So an ESR from a GMAT Club member. And the essence was the mock exams had been higher. I don't remember the exact numbers. I want to say a 660 and maybe a 700 and a 710, something along those lines. And the question is, here's my ESR, what's going on in essence? So the reason I want to go through this one, so hopefully this will be helpful for this particular GMAT test taker. But more importantly, what I want to walk you guys through, since the opportunity has arisen here, is how do you analyze your ESR? What should you be looking for in here? What information is valuable? What information is not valuable? Now, my big disclaimer here: I've certainly seen this GMAT Club member around, but I can't claim to know a whole ton about exactly what her progress has been. So you should always take it kind of in the context of how you're doing. Is 48 high for you? Is 48 low for you? If you've been scoring 50 on your mock exams, well, okay, this 48 is an underperformance. My hunch here is that it's a little bit of an underperformance on quant, bigger underperformance on verbal, based on what I know of this GMAT Club member. I'm going to dive mostly into the verbal here because I think that's the interesting part. All right, 28 verbal. One huge word of caution here. So when I'm looking at this, when we have a student who says, hey, I want to start tutoring, what's wrong with me? Here's my ESR. Yeah, this is one of the first things I look at. I'm interested in those subsection rankings. So critical reasoning versus reading comp versus sentence correction. Careful though, one big word of caution here. Keep in mind, your verbal score is determined by only 30 scored questions, 36 questions on the section, 6 are experimental and don't count. So you've got about 10 questions for each of these question types. That's it. So we're generating this percentile score in critical reasoning based on 10 questions. How precise is it really? That's a really small sample size. Does it mean something? Yeah. Does it mean everything? No. Would I look at this and conclude that this particular test taker is better at critical reasoning than reading comp? No, I would not conclude that. 7 percentile points, not a big deal. Now, if we're talking about 20 percentile points difference between one subscore and another, then I start to care. So obviously she's doing better on sentence correction than on critical reasoning or reading comp. That's interesting. That's relevant. Somebody's going right on sentence correction, not going right on critical reasoning or reading comp. I've got a sense of what that might be, and I'll talk about that in a moment. What I find interesting here, one of the big things I always look for, I look for bad starts, bad finishes, and any anomalies in terms of difficulty level. So one of the most important things you can do for yourself, adaptive tests like the GMAT, you make careless errors, you get yourself into huge trouble. So get the questions right, you know how to get right. That's what creates score stability. A lot of the videos I've done, certainly that Ukraine marathon, a lot of the verbal videos, we're talking a lot about how do you have a nice, repeatable, stable technique. Do the same thing every time when you approach a certain question type. And when I see a test taker who's missing easier questions suddenly, that's when I go, yeah, something's kind of funky with the process and something's inconsistent. Maybe they got nervous, maybe they didn't. So what I'm seeing here so far, I find it really interesting that she absolutely nailed the last quarter of the test. Maybe that's a little bit of luck. And the trouble kind of came in towards the end as I look at that middle graph, that line graph that's up there right now. And I see the difficulty of the questions she's getting wrong kind of diving down there in the third quadrant. Yeah, I realize it's only a couple questions there, but I'm really deeply suspicious that something's going on and she's missing questions she might normally get right. And I'm going to, I think we've got another version of this. Do we? We don't. Okay. I can't quite see, just the way it's rendering on my screen, I can't quite see the times down there. But one of the biggest things I also look for here, that pie chart towards the bottom, I'm really interested in general in, are we seeing differences in the times from one segment of the section to the next? Maybe what went on here, she just happened to see stuff that bogged her down in the middle, but I'm a little suspicious here that maybe there was some nerves at work. She started to feel the time pressure in the middle of the test, maybe had a hard time concentrating, and that disproportionately manifests on critical reasoning or reading comp. I think that's a very strong possibility here. So again, I'm looking for those kinds of anomalies, dives in the difficulty level, funky things with the times. This is by no means totally egregious. I wouldn't say that I'm seeing massively, absolutely heinous errors on easy questions here. The time management isn't terrible, but kind of that combination of bad reading comp, bad critical reasoning, struggling in the middle of the test, did really well in the beginning and the end, but something was happening in the middle there, I think. And I wonder if that was the time pressure kind of getting to her. Maybe there's a lack of systematicness in general in her approach. And as the time pressure kind of got in there, it exacerbated those pre-existing tendencies. So that's my hunch. Now, coming back to this, is it possible that she is just not as good at critical reasoning or reading comp as sentence correction? You bet. That is totally possible. But if those practice test scores were legitimate and there were 700s and 710s, which presumably were mid to high 30s on verbal, and again, if there's nothing funny about those practice tests, it sounds to me like this is an underperformance based on that. And for whatever reason, that manifested more in critical reasoning reading comp. And my hypothesis, I could be dead wrong, and hopefully she's watching and can weigh in. My hypothesis here is time pressure, a little bit of nerves. That's what caused a little bit of the drop from her normal performance. All right, Quant, I have less to say about this. The part that I think I hope is of value to some of you who are maybe just starting to look at your ESRs. Am I interested in that difference as we go to the kind of the second chunk of this particular page? Problem solving versus data sufficiency. I'm not sure that means much. The problem solving questions just happen to bite this particular test taker in the butt. I don't think that means much. 18 percentile points in arithmetic versus algebra geometry. I don't know. I'm not too worried about it. Now, as you get to that next, click over to this one. So you see this whole breakdown at the top of this page that people make such a big deal out of sometimes. Oh, geometry versus rates, ratios, percents versus value, order, factors, all that stuff. Again, think about this. It's 5 different categories. It's 28 questions on the GMAT Quant section, 31 questions, 3 experimental, 28 that count. 28 questions that count divided into 5 different subgroups. So we're talking about 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 questions each. Doesn't mean a whole lot. So what happened with the value order factors? Yeah, she missed 2 out of 4 maybe. I wouldn't panic over 2 errors. So I almost never take that top bit too seriously. If you look at that and go, yeah, I'm really aware that I have a problem with value order factors, whatever that means. Okay, focus on it. But I wouldn't call this a calamity at all. And the rest of this looks totally normal to me. Yeah, you should struggle a little bit more towards the end of your quant section. Questions get harder. I think that line graph at the bottom actually looks great. I don't see massive signs of underperformance here. 48's a really, really strong quant score. Maybe this is disappointing for this test taker, but it looks pretty good to me. And not a whole lot jumps out at me. My word of caution to everybody, don't overthink those breakdowns by topic. They just don't mean a ton because the sample size is so freaking small here. All right. And again, the way this is rendering on my screen, I can't get a great look at the times, but yeah, it looks like she was going pretty fast in the beginning, had a lot of time towards the end. Maybe not a bad thing, maybe rushing a little bit too much in the beginning. Maybe that first error was careless. That hurts. But all in all, no smoking guns here. All right. So that is the brief version of how to analyze an ESR. Don't take the really granular stuff too seriously. Look for big patterns. Look to kind of see, yeah, what points in the test. Good starts, good finishes, or bad starts, bad finishes. Any signs of erratic time management, that might be a sign that you just have a bad time management strategy. More often, it's a sign that you're kind of getting jittery and starting to rush through. All right. So once again, everybody, please do hit those super chats. So we're going to prioritize anything that that comes up in the super chats. Those are going to be the questions we answer first. I have 2 more that are teed up from before we did the event, so on the main thread. And before I get into kind of our next 2 questions, so message from Sajjad here I'm going to read off. So what Sajjad and his team are doing right now, they're buying necessary food items, packing them up, distributing them to needy people. And one of his class fellows in Multan lives in the affected area, helps us identify the right people worthy of help. So in this way, these donated packets are going directly to eligible people, not via some NGO. And it's straight to people that he knows needs it. Presumably people he has some personal connection to that are really suffering, or at least can kind of meet walking around the flood damaged areas. So they're collecting money locally as well, buying items locally, get more bang for your buck, loading them onto a mini truck to distribute them. So absolutely phenomenal grassroots effort. Wonderful stuff, Sajjad. So again, it's very rare, certainly for us here in the West, privileged folks here in the United States, we go, hey, there's this war over there, this disaster over there. We send money to some NGO, write a check. And yeah, there's NGOs I trust. I've got friends that work at them. The ones we chose for Ukraine Marathon, carefully chosen. But this is one of those very rare opportunities where you know exactly where your money's going. You can send a private message to Sajjad on GMAT Club. Hope I don't flood your inbox, buddy. And he can tell you exactly what's going on. So very rare opportunity to have a very direct difference. So please donate what you can. All right. So let's keep going here. I don't exactly know, how do we want to do this? Do we want to give you guys 2 minutes to work through this, or should I just blast away? Let's go ahead and let's do this kind of the way we normally do it in these videos. I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes. I'm going to be pretty strict on the timing here. So I had somebody ask a question about this question, and it is a notorious question. And I am part of why it became notorious, because I messaged some things badly with this question. I don't necessarily want to go through it in massive detail, but there was a very pointed question that somebody asked about it that I think is a good one. So tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and disappear for exactly 2 minutes. Anybody watching this live, take 2 minutes, go ahead and take a shot at this question. Pop your answer into the chat if you're watching it live. Let me know what you think. And if you have a justification for why you chose what you chose, great. And then I'll address the right answer. I'll do it pretty quickly, but I'll address the right answer and kind of one of the hearts of the issues that people get into here. So go ahead and take 2 minutes, and I will disappear so I don't distract you. And thank you, everybody, for the donations. Please keep those coming. Okay, it's already been about 2 minutes, and I realize that some of you guys watching this live might need more time. Apologies, I want to keep this moving, get to as many questions as I can. Um, the question here specifically, and the reason why this question is a little bit, I don't know, kind of infamous in a way, is there's a very persistent myth out there that you can't have a possessive, so you can't have a subject pronoun. So she, for example, the pronoun she can't refer back to, in this case, Elizabeth Barrett Browning's. So possessive, the idea, and again, I don't agree with this at all, and I'll get into that in a second. But one of the things that's made the rounds on the internet is that the idea that you have this subject pronoun she, and that can't refer to Browning's because this is possessive. It almost feels like it operates like an adjective in a way, right? So in this case, it's Browning's success. So it's like, well, what's the real thing here? Well, it's a success. She can't refer to the success. Browning's is, in a sense, spiritually, not exactly grammatically, but it's kind of just modifying the success, right? And so the idea is, well, she can't refer back to this possessive noun. That's actually not true at all. And by the way, I'm guilty. There's a video I filmed a very long time ago where I contributed to perpetuating that myth. And a lot of what we do here in GMAT land. So what are test prep folks doing? We're looking at the same official questions you guys are. Maybe we look at them more often, more deeply, go take the test more often, all that stuff. But we're kind of going, yeah, what sorts of things does the GMAT seem to care about on sentence correction? And for a very, very long time, we couldn't find an example where a subject pronoun ever referred to a possessive. And it kind of went, yeah, it seems like that's a rule. Seems like that's a thing they're testing. And then this question pops up and it's like, nope, no, they do not consider that a rule. So with that in mind, the way I would think about pronouns in general on the GMAT, and plenty of videos about that, both on the GMAT Ninja YouTube channel and on the GMAT Club channel. I would think about it this way. You see a pronoun, you see she. Is there something in the vicinity that is reasonable, that it could reasonably refer to? Then okay, move on and look for other things. Ambiguity is not an absolute rule. This business of subject pronoun can't refer to a possessive, certainly not a rule at all. And that was the heart of the question that was asked by the GMAT Club member on the main thread here. So with that in mind, I'm going to whip through this pretty quickly, and plenty of discussion on this on the GMAT Club forum. And maybe somebody could post this in the chat, post the link to the thread. But the quick version here is you've got a lot of comparison issues going on here, and that's really the biggest thing. And I'm going to go through this faster than I would if we weren't a little bit time strapped and didn't have so many other questions to get to. But as I look at A, I go, okay, although she was considered among her contemporaries to be the better poet's kind of odd. But we wouldn't say that Elizabeth Barrett Browning was overshadowed by a success. You could say that her success was overshadowed by her husband's success. We could probably say that she was overshadowed by her husband. You wouldn't say that she was overshadowed by his success. That doesn't really make any sense. Again, my first pass through, I might be conservative about it in real life. Again, in the interest of time, I'd go pretty quickly. If we buy into that, I can go pretty quickly here. She was overshadowed by success. Same thing in B. What about C? Later overshadowed by the success of her husband. Her poetry had been considered among her contemporaries to be better than, I guess, the poetry of her husband. You got the timeline problem there. Had been considered first, later overshadowed. I guess that kind of works. Poetry had been considered among her contemporaries to be better than that of her husband. I suppose you could hang on to that. Be conservative. D, so much clearer, although her success was later overshadowed by the success of her husband. Good. But actually in C, I take that back. The part I was glossing over. It sounds like she was overshadowed by the success of her husband, or her poetry was overshadowed by the success of her husband. Later overshadowed by her success. We're going to look right after that. The poetry was overshadowed. C is out. Hang on to D. And E, the poetry was considered among her contemporaries as better than her husband. Her poetry was better than her husband. Again, that doesn't make any sense. E's out. You can't compare poetry to the husband. So really all about comparisons here. Don't trip on the pronoun thing. All right. So Jad Nikhil, let's keep that. There's one more question I have here that was put on the thread originally. Let's save that for later. And let's actually go to some of the questions that are popping up on the live chat. I want to prioritize the folks that are that have been donating here. That is such a broad question, Adi, and thank you so much, and thank you for donating. I really appreciate it. So this, I don't mean to turn this into a promotion for something we're doing at GMAT Club, but we're actually in the middle of beta testing. We're about to start beta testing on Monday. It's actually a 13-week study plan is the design of it. And depending on how that goes, we're going to beta test the first 4 weeks of it with a small group of GMAT Club members. If that goes well, we're going to release the full thing soon after a full 13 weeks of it. And Adi, I realize that might be a little bit late because I'm guessing if you're asking for a 2-month plan, you might be pretty far along here. And if we get you a 13-week plan about 4 to 6 weeks from now, probably not what you're looking for. So this is something we're working on more broadly. I guess if I had to give you kind of general advice here, it's, be honest about your weaknesses and don't binge. Again, it's so hard to answer this question for you without context on where you stand, right? If I had a bunch of data on what your homework looks like, what your practice tests look like, I could say a lot more. In general, you have 2 months to study. I would focus first on the things that you might need the longest amount of time to improve on, that are the things that underpin more questions. So with our private students, when we do private tutoring, we typically, again, depends on the student, but typically look first at critical reasoning and reading comp, because those are the things that if you need time to improve, get better and stronger at reading, battling your way through this language, that's where you're going to need some time. You can't binge and get a lot better at reading comp in 2 weeks. It's just not going to happen. So that's one of the areas I would look at first. Maybe you're already great. Maybe that's not an issue for you, but I would start by looking at that. Be honest with yourself, do official questions, take a good look at the data and say, hey, where am I in relation to where I stand? Is this good enough? If not, good, steady practice of critical reasoning reading comp throughout. You can't binge on it. If you go try to do 200 reading comprehension questions in a week, your head's going to pop off, roll down the street. It's not going to help you get better. You're probably going to get burnt out. So that's one thing I look at first. The other thing I look at the very, very beginning, I'm really interested in quant foundations, and I mean that in 2 different ways. One is, yes, the topics that underpin a lot of the GMAT questions, right? So arithmetic and algebra, not glamorous, but if you have trouble factoring quadratic, you better get that tightened up ASAP, because you're going to see all kinds of questions, geometry, rates questions, all sorts of things that are kind of more advanced. There's algebra underneath it. There's arithmetic underneath it. So I mean it in one sense that, yeah, if you have any holes in your fundamental arithmetic and algebra, really important to start there, get those knocked out right at the very beginning. The second sense of it, though, is that if you have a tendency to make careless errors and your process isn't locked down, that's a problem. So what I want you to look at in the very, very beginning, are you making unforced errors, quant or verbal? And if you are, I want you to really think about it. Again, we talk about it a lot in some of our videos, both on the GMAT Club channel, the Ukraine Marathon, and over on the GMAT Ninja YouTube channel. I want you to really think about, hey, I'm going to read the question twice. Make sure I don't misread something. You can't have errors from that kind of thing. Check your work as you go. Read one more time at the end. You want to make sure that you're being deliberate, systematic every single time. No careless errors. They kill you on an adaptive test like the GMAT. You can be way better at math than me, and I bet anything there's some people watching who are. And if you're sloppy, you're just not going to perform up to your capabilities. So those are the first things. Quant foundations, quant process, no sloppy errors, reading comp, critical reasoning. Now, if those are all great, no problem. You can move on to other things. But I would basically think of it from there. You're slowly working your way up to the things that are, I'd say, less foundational, kind of working your way up the pyramid. So reading comp, critical reasoning, arithmetic, algebra, word problems on quant, geometry maybe might be part of your next layer, ratios, percents, things like that appear pretty frequently. Verbal, you can start mixing up some sentence correction. That's totally fine. Don't binge on it, though, because there's not that many sentence correction questions out there. So I would introduce those. Typically with our students, we introduce it a little bit later in the process. If you only have 2 months, maybe you want to at least kick the tires early, see if you need work on it. Top of the pyramid, the things you should worry about the least. People trip all over worrying about probability, combinatorics, these granular little topics that, boy, you just don't see that many of them on the GMAT. Do you see them? Yeah. Is that the reason why you're 60 points, 100 points below what you want? No. So take all that in context. The topics you don't see a ton of, you want to kind of study towards the end. If you don't get to them, it's not going to ruin your day. Sentence correction as well. There's a lot of obsession we see on the forum, and I think it's gotten better over the years. Simple versus complex gerunds. Doesn't matter, guys. That is not what's important. There's a handful of things. You better understand what to do with pronouns and parallelism and modifiers and some of those really foundational issues, subject verb agreement. But as much as anything, it's just being really clean about your process. And I've got a whole barrel of sentence correction videos where I blah, blah about that. those are fairly easy to find. All my old sentence correction videos talking about that process. Again, there's some on the GMAT Ninja channel, bazillion on GMAT Club, Ukraine Marathon included. Get your process right. Don't worry about the fine details of grammar. You just don't see them very often. Cover the really, really key stuff and just pay attention to your data. Pay really close attention. Pay attention to the unforced errors. Really, really, really important. Adi, I hope that helps. I couldn't personalize that very much. So I don't know anything about you, but hopefully that helps just a little bit. And by the way, Grace, wonderful to see you here. Seeing a few familiar faces in the chat makes me happy. Okay, absolute phrases versus run-on sentences. Yeah, great question, RG, and thank you for the donation. Let's see if I can do this off the cuff. So the issue here, I hope I'm barking up the right tree for you, RG, but what happens a lot of the time is that we look at things where it's really a noun modifying a noun, and it feels like a run-on sentence, but it isn't necessarily. And I'm going to do my best to improvise some examples here that hopefully get at what you're talking about on sentence correction. So if I say something like, I like Punjabi food. Now I could modify this, right? I like Punjabi food. And then I could give some examples, right? I could say, such as, I know nothing about Punjabi food really. So anybody help me out in the chat here? I got myself a little bit stuck because I don't know that much about the regions of Pakistan. I'm going to say Sikh kebabs because it's the first Pakistani dish that jumps to mind. I have no idea if that's something that's popular in Punjab, but I'm going to go with it. And I'm probably spelling that wrong, but let's go with it. Kebabs can be spelled a million different ways. All right. Apologies for the misspellings. I'm going to make enemies in Pakistan with this. Dal makhani. Thank you. This is great. Wonderful dish, by the way. Great choice. Thank you for that. So, and did I spell that right? I think so, but it is quite spicy. Perfect. We're going to run with that. I got the K and the H reversed. Okay, no problem, right? This is just modifying the food. Now, what if I say something like Punjabi food, and I can say, which is spicy? No problem. Still just modifying the noun. You're not going to bat an eye here at all. But now, what if I start to kind of turn this into something more like I don't know, that describes it a little bit more. I like Punjabi food. Spicy treats that often feature lentils. Still no problem, right? I'm still describing the food. You have no issue here. But I can keep doing the same thing, and I can start to make it sound awfully weird. It becomes something that we call an absolute phrase. Don't worry about the jargon. It's a fancy way of saying a certain kind of noun phrase that modifies a noun. And I could say spicy treats prepared by South Asian geniuses. This is starting to feel like a sentence, isn't it? Spicy treats prepared by South Asian geniuses. It starts to feel like you have a verb here. No, it's not. It's a modifier. But the essence of what we get into when we have absolute phrases is, depending on how I construct this, and again, I'm not necessarily doing the best job of it off the cuff. And we actually do have a video on the GMAT Ninja channel specifically about the absolute phrases, and maybe that'll help a little bit. But this starts to feel like a run-on sentence now. Full sentence. If you look at this the wrong way, looks like a full sentence, right? Subject, verb. Again, it just isn't. This is a modifier. And really, this is just a noun modifying another noun. So again, I don't care if you know the word absolute phrase. If it helps you to kind of organize information and get used to these, great. But the idea basically, I think the heart of the question is, when do you have an absolute phrase? When do you have a run sentence? And really it just comes down to, is this modifying something and just sounds like a clause? Or is it a full clause in and of itself? In this case, it's a noun that sounds like a clause. And again, if I had a little more time to prepare, I could probably come up with something a little bit more devious here that's going to sound more tempting or sound more wrong, I guess. But really, that's all it is. That's all we're talking about when we do absolute phrases. Great question, RG. Thank you so much. All right. Next one, please, gentlemen. And actually, before I get to this question, so we're at the 35-minute mark here. Once again, if somehow you're just joining us, fundraiser for Pakistan, anything you donate in the super chat or over on the GMAT Club forum, you can hit there's donate buttons on the main thread. And this is absolutely a grassroots effort. Sajjad Ahmad, known as Sajjad 1994, one of the great guys of the forum, absolutely heroic efforts for years and years in the Reading Comp forum. He and his schoolmates are literally going around the flood affected areas, finding families in need, donating food and supplies to them. This is the type of grassroots effort you very, very rarely see, very rarely have a chance to be a part of, certainly for those of us who are privileged to live in nice, fancy places here in the West. So guy I trust 100%, known him for years. Your money is absolutely going efficiently and directly to help people who are directly affected by the flooding. 33 million displaced people. Absolute massive human tragedy. So please donate whatever you can. If you can't, please ping some friends, send some PMs to people you know on GMAT Club, whatever. Get them in here, get them to join the party. Even just the moral support makes us happy. And one more quick wisecrack about GMAT Club, Spirit of GMAT Club, world politics here. So the guys that put this together, but you guys know me, American, Greek, and Ukrainian descent. We have founder of GMAT Club from Ukraine. We've got Nikhil and Abhijit doing all kinds of stuff here from India, and then Sajjad, of course, from Pakistan. Other members of our team, Mexico, Serbia, all over the world. This is GMAT Club. We see somebody in need somewhere. Let's help them out. All right, next question, please. What if my test is, wow, that's awesome, 100 points, congratulations. That makes me happy. Yeah, this is, it's such a good question, and thank you for the donation. My general generic answer to this, kind of separating out from the specificity of your situation, when people say, what do I do in the 2 weeks before my test? Our general line is, hey, you're polishing at this point and you're trying to maximize your test day performance. You're not going to learn a ton about, I don't know, are you going to become a much better reader in the next 2 weeks and all of a sudden make a huge leap on reading comprehension? Probably not. Are you going to cram a whole bunch of grammar into your head in 2 weeks and all of a sudden make a huge leap on sentence correction? Probably not. I bet you've already studied your butt off on the sentence correction, right? Quant 2. So for most people, the way I think about those last 2 weeks, again, in general, and everybody's different, and exactly what's going to work best for you might be different than the next guy. But in general, it's, yeah, you're maybe moderating your homework a little bit. Are you doing practice tests? Yeah, but we don't need you doing a practice test the day before your test. That's a recipe for burnout. For most people, the day you do it, the day after you do a full test, you're going to be a little slow. You might not feel it. You might not feel consciously tired, but you're not going to be at your best the next day. So yeah, should you still be doing practice tests depending on kind of how many you've already done, what you got left in the tank? Sure, don't overdo it. People get nuts and they do 8 practice tests in the last 2 weeks. Terrible idea. Do enough. Be really honest about what the data is telling you, what it points you towards as far as things to work on. I can say all that. I think beyond that, though, where do you really have a chance to move the needle by 50 points? 50 points is a lot. Maybe over 2 weeks, you can kind of get 20 points better at things fundamentally, right? So you kind of do your practice tests, maybe get better at time management. Maybe that's an issue for you. Maybe you're still working on eliminating careless errors on quant. Maybe you're still polishing up random topics, statistics, overlapping sets, rates, your command of harder parallelism questions, your ability to really decipher meaning on sentence correction. Maybe you struggle a bit with assumption questions on critical reasoning, whatever. Maybe there's some things you can get a little bit better at. Maybe that's 20 or 30 points. My argument here is, for most people, where I want you to focus at least a good chunk of your energy in those last 2 weeks, is how can you be the very best, sharpest, most focused, most alert version of yourself 2 weeks from today? That's probably the thing that you can do the most with. And what I would suggest here, again, I don't know that much about your own situation, but what I would suggest here is, what if you can get half of those points from getting better at GMAT stuff and half of those points, roughly half, from just performing better? So I want you to focus on sleep. I want you to focus on exercise. Don't have to do a ton. I mean, we actually have a personal trainer that we work with at GMAT Ninja, has a psychology degree, brilliant, really fascinating guy, really interesting ideas about exercise and your mind. And so he designs these 12-minute workouts for people. And we've actually got one up on our channel, our YouTube channel. 12 minutes, that's all you need to do, right? Get the blood pumping, try to get some of the stress out. Helps you focus. Maybe you already exercise a lot, maybe you don't, but now's a good time to do something, right? Go for a walk, depending on what climate you're in, right? So exercise, sleep well, really focus on that. Good regular sleep, go to bed at the same time every night. Don't watch videos in bed, all that kind of stuff. Focus on your diet. Enjoy yourself a little bit. Don't show up to your test as a ball of stress. If you're into meditation, great, keep that up really regularly. Even if you've only been occasionally into meditation, again, really, really, really good scientific studies, peer-reviewed studies on mindfulness training, meditation specifically, improving test scores because it helps your working memory so much. So yeah, take a look at your data, be honest about it, focus on your weaknesses for sure. Don't over focus. No binge studying. Now is not the time to binge study. Don't stay up late. Never sacrifice sleep for studying in your last 2 weeks. Take really, really, really good care of your body and mind. I want you to show up to that test rested, relaxed, happy as you can be walking into a test room. And I know it's a little bit counterintuitive, but the GMAT is designed to be something you can't cram for. That's the whole way it's designed, right? It's skill, it's reasoning skills, it's reading skills you build up over a long period of time. Can you improve those skills in 2 weeks? Yeah, you're going to improve them a lot. Probably not. No, but you can get better and sharper and more focused and just be the very best version of yourself physically and mentally. And that's where I would focus in those last couple of weeks. All right. And thank you so much for the donation. That was fun. How best to use GMAT coding videos? Krista, great question. Yeah. So this is one of those things we puzzled over a little bit, kind of with the team at GMAT Club, with some of the guys at GMAT Ninja as well. We produced all these videos, and I have no idea. I mean, we're probably up to more than 100 hours of video content, and that's just of the stuff that is really explicitly instructional, not things like Q&As, right? But they really explicitly like, hey, here's a video on this sentence correction topic or this quant topic. And the question is how best to use it. I mean, part of what we're doing is we're working on developing the study plan. It might not work, but part of what we're going after there is what's the homework that you might do that aligns well with these videos, or could align well with these videos. That's part of what we're going after. And I wish I had a really good answer to that. I think the generic thing I would say, and again, apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name, but I guess my maybe a generic thought on it that is, be honest about the data that's coming out of your tests, especially your official tests, right? And if you're noticing that your critical reason reading comp just aren't where you want them to be, whatever that might mean, maybe they're far away, maybe they're not so far away, maybe you're just inconsistent, and your best results are really good, your worst results just aren't quite where you want them to be. Inconsistency is a really big deal. If you're seeing that in your results on any particular topic area, question type, that's when I would jump into the videos and say, okay, I'm going to watch. I'll pick on reading comprehension again. So a couple years ago, we did thank you. I was just about to mention the reading comp videos. So yeah, I'll answer this question as well. Thank you. What I was about to say is, for example, with reading comprehension, let's say that you're not happy with your results, and let's say that at your very best, they're really good. Let's say you take a full MBA.com practice test. You only miss one reading comp question, you get a good score, you're really happy, great. And then you go and you do some sections out of the official guide, or you do some LSATs, or you do another practice test, and you go, no, that wasn't so good. I did 25 questions. They weren't the hardest questions. They were official questions, and I missed 8. Wait a minute. So something's going on. At your best, you're really good. At your worst, not so good. I care a lot about consistency, and a lot of what we focus on in those videos is how do you get consistent? What does a repeatable process look like so that you're the same test taker every single time you do reading comp? That's what we're chasing. So when you say that inconsistency in your results or disappointment in your results, whatever the area might be, if it's reading comprehension, go watch those videos. Did a series of 4 a couple years back. And then once you're done watching those, hit the fast forward button as much as you need to. Don't feel like you have to sit there and watch every bit of them because I say some goofy stuff. Go back, do a few more sets, whatever resource you're using, and monitor your data again and go, hey, was I able to put that into practice? That fundamentally, I think, is the best way to use really any instructional resource, is kind of get yourself some sort of data to start with, go watch the videos on whatever topic it might be, and then go back and get more of the data and see if you're seeing improvement. And if not, ask yourself, hey, what part of this didn't resonate with me? maybe this guy Charles in the video sucks. Maybe there's something that you're still where you think you're doing it the way we advise you to, but you're not quite. And just try to be really honest with yourself about what's working, what isn't working for you. And again, try to make it data driven. That's what we do with our students, right? It's not just, hey, watch these videos and do this thing. Monitor their data and go, okay, something didn't click. What did I say to you in that last tutoring session that didn't land? Let's figure that out. Your second question, more videos. It's funny. I actually premiered a video. So honestly, that 4 video series that I did back in 2020 on the GMAT Club YouTube channel, I think it's pretty comprehensive. There's always more questions out there, but I think it really kind of covers all the high notes. It's, what is it that you would get from a 5th video or a 6th video or a 12th video? Yeah, we're going through more passages, and does it help to kind of have the process modeled? Does that help you to kind of get better at the kind of thinking and processing and process? Sure, maybe additional ones do help. But in an additional video, I wouldn't say a whole lot that's different. And I think we did a couple hours of reading comp. I can't remember, maybe an hour and a half in that Ukraine marathon earlier this year. So out of one side of mouth, I'll say, yeah, those 4 videos, I don't have a whole lot to add to them. Out of another side of mouth, I'll say, yeah, I just premiered another video on the GMAT Ninja YouTube channel today. We've got 6 videos in that series. Do I think it's better than the ones we did 2 years ago live? Not necessarily, but if you need more practice with different passages, that's a good place to look. And as always on GMAT Club, we're community driven. If we get enough calls for more videos on the forums, we'll absolutely respond to that. It's just a question of, are there enough people that are going to watch them? And I don't think those have had great audiences, to be honest, because I don't think for some people those videos are helpful. For a lot of people, watching a reading comp video is kind of like watching paint dry. So if you're getting something out of it, awesome, I'm thrilled. You can watch some of the newer ones that we're releasing over on the GMAT Ninja channel, and by all means, reach out to us, via GMAT Club or whatever, if you think more would help, and try to be specific. What is it you'd like to see? And if other folks agree with you, we'll take a crack at it. All right, next one. Thank you so much, Prisha. Great questions. Yeah, great question. Great question. Thank you so much for this, and thank you for the donation. Yeah, and again, I'm going to read too much into this because all I get is 2 sentences, and I'm going to analyze your entire GMAT life in 2 sentences. Keep looking through grammar. I think that's the issue. Grammar's important. Don't get me wrong. Grammar's wonderful. There's lots of grammar on the GMAT, but it is not fundamentally a grammar test. So what's the name of the section? It's not reading in grammar. It's verbal reasoning. And we can roll our eyes and go, hey, look at the jargon. No, that's kind of silly. And I think it is on some level, but that's what they're going after. Which of these 5 sentences best communicates a logical idea? And yes, grammar is a piece of it. I want you to understand what a pronoun is. I want you to understand what subjects and verbs are. Good for you to be able to recognize a run-on sentence. No semicolons used, right? We can talk about some of these things that are usage, but there are very, very few absolute rules that get tested on the GMAT. There's very few things that apply 100% of the time. That's an extreme rarity. You come up with a rule, and I can show you a GMAT question that breaks it, or a way that you could break it with a totally legit sentence. So are rules good? Is studying grammar good? Yes, but if that's all you're doing, you're going to hit a wall pretty quickly, because really it's about that intersection of usage, grammar, and meaning. And what's grammar for? It's to help us communicate more clearly. That's exactly what it's for. Help us communicate clearer and better. So my hunch here is that you've gone, again, I could be wrong, but doing my best off of 2 sentences. My hunch here is that you're probably studying grammar at the expense of thinking about meaning and logic, and going down the rabbit hole with grammar. And it's like, yeah, okay, simple versus complex gerund is one of my favorite examples because it comes up on the forum a lot. I had no idea what that was for 15 years of teaching GMAT. And when somebody asked me about it the first time, I was like, I know what a gerund is, but I don't know why I would care about simple versus complex. I had to look it up. And it's like, hey guys, you're so far down the rabbit hole. It has nothing to do with how you would analyze this question. So you can start with a couple of the sense correction videos, we've done here at GMAT Club. Really get into, hey, what does a good process look like? I don't want you worrying too much about splits. I think we have a video called something like splits or BS, or sort of BS on GMAT sense correction. Another one that's just, hey, here's how to approach it. Here's sort of your basic 2 steps. And I think you probably need to focus a little bit more on meaning. Now, it's possible if you have a hard time just understanding the precise difference in meaning between 2 sentences, that might be the problem. That might be part of it. But my hunch from your question is that you're so focused on the grammar, you're not letting your brain kind of think about, yeah, which of these really makes sense, and probably getting a little bit too rigid. That's my sense. And again, check out the video, especially kind of the first couple that are sort of big picture videos, and let's see if that helps you. And as always, come tag people on GMAT Club. All right. Yeah, last 3 days, and again, I'm so sorry for any mispronunciations here. Swarnava, last 3 days before the exam. Yeah, same thing I said to the question about what to do in the last 2 weeks, except I think maybe even deeper down that road. I want you. I don't say this because I'm a nice guy, because no one pays me to be nice. I want you relaxed and happy in that test room. I want you rested. I want you focused. So last 3 days before the exam, will it boost your confidence to review a few things, do a few practice questions, make sure that you're kind of in the zone, you've got your mojo going, do little sets of questions just to make sure that you've kind of just got the momentum going and you have the feel of it, you're in the flow. Yeah, good. A little bit of practice, good. 3 days before the exam, probably don't want you taking practice tests. That ship has probably sailed for you. But I want you exercising. I want you sleeping. I want you eating well. If you're into meditation, or if you have any interest at all, I want you trying that. And by the way, fundamentally as a person, meditation is not my cup of tea. I recommend it only because research tells us to, and working with students, we see them improve, right? We have a mindfulness coach. She gets results. So I'm not, whatever you might think of meditation, depending on your culture. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest. People did not meditate where I grew up. This is not part of my personal culture, but it works. It helps. So all of those things, once you're rested, happy, relaxed, get some sleep. One thing we often tell our students to do, and sometimes we assign this formally as homework in their last 24 to 48 hours before their test, is we'll say, I want you to make a schedule of everything you're going to do. And I want your schedule filled with things that are relaxing and energizing and distracting. I don't want you sitting there the day before your exam or the day of the exam thinking about the GMAT, because that's just going to drain your battery, stress you out. I want you enjoying yourself. Go spend time with friends and family. Go have dinner with a friend you haven't seen in a while. Watch your favorite show, whatever it is, whatever makes you happy. Go, if you love playing tennis or hiking, go do something active that you enjoy. Treat it like a little mini vacation. A little bit of review, yeah, but be really, really thoughtful about what is that going to be. I don't want you studying 6 hours the day before the exam. I don't think I want you doing 2 hours the day before the exam. An hour, maybe 2, okay. 30 minutes, okay. None is also okay. Whatever you need to build your confidence and feel like you're in the flow of things. Don't overdo it. No cramming. Get your mind right. Get your body right. Relax. Enjoy yourself. This isn't nice guy advice. This is cold, hard test prep advice. Very, very quick story on this. Once upon a time, long, long time ago, I was a professional dancer, and I did not dance as a kid. I got into it kind of, as an undergrad. Actually dropped out of undergrad to go pursue a career as a professional dancer, and was in a trapeze dance company. Long story for another day. But so all of a sudden, I kind of, very, very rapidly went from this dance thing is kind of cool to I dropped out of school. I'm in this professional company, and it's the day of my very first professional performance. And so I have to be at the theater at 5 o'clock to get ready. And, so I wake up, whenever 9, 10 o'clock, probably something like that. I got the whole day ahead of me, nowhere else to be. And I remember saying, hey, I'm going to go to my favorite coffee house. And that's how old I am. There were newspapers back then, and I'm gonna go read the newspaper. And I'm sitting there, shaking like a leaf in the coffee house reading the newspaper because I'm so nervous about getting to the theater. That didn't help me one bit. And what I should have done that day was fill my day with things that are relaxing and energizing. So same thing here. I don't want you sitting there thinking about the GMAT and get nervous. I want you doing things that relax and energize you and distract you. So enjoy your life in the last 3 days. All right. Thank you so much for the question. Next victim. Is it possible? My critical reason was weak in verbal and geometry and counting and quant. Yeah, that it's really hard for me to share a complete plan here. That this is very much, thank you so much for the question. And again, apologies for mispronunciations, Nasha, and thank you for the donation. Yeah, this is one of those general questions that people get all the time. And I'll answer the kind of the second sentence, that first question first. Look, is it possible to improve? It's always possible to improve. And it's a question of what that takes. And, as tutors, I mean, a lot of what we believe in very strongly, at our company is we don't want to give you false promises or pretend that things are easy. When I started doing test prep 20 plus years ago, it was all this silly marketing stuff. Hey, we're going to raise your score by 180 points in 35 minutes guaranteed. And there was just all this gimmicky stuff. And some of that still exists in the industry. It's gotten better. So I can be really brutal about saying like, hey, if you want to improve quickly, depending on where your skills are, that might be a problem. What if, and again, I have no idea in your case personally, but I'm sure there are people watching here, your reading skills aren't very good. Okay, if that's the case, there's going to be a ceiling on your score. It's going to be really hard to improve quickly. Can you improve your reading skills? Yeah, it's not going to happen in 3 weeks, but can you improve your reading skills? You bet. If you're willing to put the time in, possibly over a long period of time, they can get better. Let's say that you're absolutely putrid at arithmetic and algebra. Okay, you're not going to get 200 points in the next 3 weeks. You're not going to get to a 700 anytime soon. But if you're willing to put in the time and effort, you can get there. So and again, I don't say that to be sort of generic positive guy, because I tend to err on the opposite side, be brutal realist guy. Is it possible? Yeah. It's just a question of what's driving kind of that wedge between your 540, whatever your goal is, being honest with yourself about it. And if you're willing to put in the time and effort to change, maybe it's test taking habits, maybe you're sloppy, maybe you're nervous, could be anything, could be any combination of things. But any of those can be remedied if you're willing to put in the time and effort. And sometimes it's hard. It's really hard to do. It's hard to be less anxious on test day. It's hard to become a better reader. If there's some missing math foundations, you're bad at algebra. Yeah, that's something, ideally you would have learned a very long time ago. And if you need to build those foundations as an adult, it's hard. But people do it all the time if you're willing to put in the effort. So no doubt there, and anything is possible with enough time and effort and honesty about what you really need to do. So weak and verbal and geometry and counting quant, geometry and counting, those aren't, I'm guessing that's from your ESR. Again, small sample size on the ESR, talked about at the very beginning of the video today. So maybe those are real weaknesses. Maybe that's sort of a relic of small sample size on your ESR. I'm not quite sure where we were getting that from, but obviously it's easy enough to learn geometry. Plenty of resources out there. Our guy Harry did a really good three video series on our channel. I don't think I've ever said anything smart about geometry on a video, but tons of stuff on the GMAT Club channel from all sorts of really good sources. Weak and verbal, that can mean all kinds of things. So I'm not going to get too deep into that. Good 4-month plan. Again, that's part of what we're working on, is a good 13-week study plan. And I gave kind of an answer to this earlier when I was talking about the person who was asking about a 2-month study plan. Start with the things that take the longest to improve. Be honest about your data. It might be critical reasoning reading comp first for you. Maybe there's some quant foundations missing. There might be issues with processing consistency. Things that take the longest: changing habits, getting better at reading. Focus on those first. Don't trip out too much on little fine things. Counting, I'm not sure how many of those questions. That's not the difference between a 540 and a 700. Is it important? Sure. Is it the first thing you should focus on? Probably not. And as always, lots of official stuff. Official questions as much as you can. Non-official is fine for quant, but I would be very, very careful with them on verbal. We don't give them to our students at all. If you need extras for reading comp, critical reasoning, use LSAT. And I realize that's a really general answer, but hopefully that helps a bit. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for the donation. And thank you for weighing in, everybody. Yeah, I think people, it is not uncommon. Great question. Thank you so much for the donation, Arnesh. Yeah, you could certainly post it on the GMAT Club forum. People post these all the time in the shared GMAT experience. If there's particular experts you're interested in, feel free to tag them. And no guarantees. I know that I get so many tags and PMs. I have no prayer of keeping up with all of them, but there's some of the other experts running around GMAT Club, or just other students who suffered like you have. What I would do is post it in the shared GMAT experience. Be really specific about your questions. So what is it that you're worried about? And the more pointed you can be in saying, hey, my questions are 1, 2, and 3. Don't ask 10. People are going to get lost. But if you have like 1 or 2 or 3 specific questions, like, hey, I noticed that, for example, I'll pick on the previous question that came up, geometry and counting. How big of a deal is this? If that's what you're seeing. So try to be as specific as you can with your questions. Feel free to post it publicly, share GMAT Experience Forum. And there's lots of helpful people that'll come in and help. And again, tag anybody you're interested in. Please don't be offended if they don't answer. Again, I am so buried in things I'd love to respond to, I don't get to. So please don't be offended. And I know that's true for a lot of people on GMAT Club, but that's the way to go. Hopefully we'll get you somewhere. Piyush, and Yeah, wonderful to see you here, because I think I've seen you on GMAT Club before. That's a familiar name. Maybe it's just somebody else with a similar name in their GMAT Club username. But thank you so much for the donation. Videos have helped me push my score from 650 to 730. And now what? Great question. I'm glad somebody asked this, because this is one of those things, right? So 40 verbal, guys, that's 89th percentile last time I checked, maybe 90th. It's awfully close to 90th percentile. Again, those percentiles change a little bit over time. But last time I checked it, I think it was 89th. That's a great score, and 730 is a great score. And the world lost its mind some years ago. And I assume that underpinning your question here is that, yeah, you probably want a 750, 760, and that's going to give you an edge in admissions that a 730 wouldn't. It's an abuse of the test. It shouldn't be that way, but it is that way. And if you're shooting for the 750, 760, yep, that is probably a rational thing to do, depending on what your goals are. So totally get it. Yeah, without seeing, again, this is my terrible answer to a lot of the questions I'm getting. Without seeing exactly what you're missing, it's hard for me to guess kind of exactly where the weak spots are. Now, what I find interesting here is that you're asking specifically about critical reasoning and sense correction. Now, I'm going to imagine something that might not be the case, but maybe this resonates with somebody else watching. Maybe this resonates with you, Piyush. Is if what you're saying to me is that your reading comp results are consistently really strong. So on your practice test, for example, let's say that you're consistently getting a 40 on your MBA.com official practice tests. And let's say that you're consistently missing 1 or 2 on reading comp and maybe a few more on critical reasoning sense correction. Or maybe your ESRs are telling you that critical reasoning and sentence correction are weaker. Or maybe you're doing LSATs or you're doing official guide sets, and the data is telling you this clearly. So I'm going to assume that this is really true. You're better at reading comp than the other two. If so, great. So I look at that and I go, okay, what we know then is your reading skills are better than your score, right? So the way I look at reading comp and critical reasoning, maybe you're better at one than the other. I look at the better one and go, okay, you're capable of doing this on every part of the verbal. So if you're knocking reading comp out of the park, and you're obviously not bad at critical reasoning and sense correction, you're getting a 40, you're really good at those too. But if this is reading comp and this is critical reasoning and sense correction, no matter how big that gap is, I go, okay, it is certainly possible to bring this up to here. This tells me something about your ceiling, maybe. Maybe this could be raised too. But if your reading comp is that good, your reading skills are good, your precision's good, it's in there. Now, the question is, what's going on with your process on critical reasoning and sense correction? Is it possible that you have some grammar holes? Possible. Pretty unlikely. Possible. So I'm guessing you studied a lot. Critical reasoning, is it possible that you really struggle? There's certain question types you don't know how to do? Really unlikely. I'll bet you know what an assumption is. I bet you know how to handle it. I bet you know what an inference is. I bet you know how to handle it. If you see patterns in your errors, you're missing certain kinds of questions, by all means, address those. But my hunch is that there's something more, I don't know, I guess a little bit more broad in you're misreading or misinterpreting things just a little bit. I'm guessing here on critical reasoning and sentence correction. So if you're really great at reading comp, a little bit less good at critical reasoning, my bet is that there's just a little bit of precision in your reading or your reasoning that could be better. You miss a modifier here or there. And my goofy textbook example, X is a good solution to our problem. X is the best solution to our problem. X is a solution to our problem. You miss that one modifier, best or only or good, you're in trouble. My hunch is that might be what's happening here, that keeps your critical reasoning a little bit worse than your reading comp. Similar on sentence correction. Once you get to the 40 level on sentence correction, more grammar is probably not the deal. That's probably not the problem. It's usually just getting better slowly, and because it's hard at the meaning-based things. And sometimes it is so subtle. And that difference between 2 answer choices, they both sound good, or they both sound bad, even worse, or one of them sounds good and one of them sounds bad, but the one that sounds bad actually makes a little more sense. And it is a heck of a skill to get better at those meaning-based questions and to get better at looking at sentences and really parsing the difference. My hunch is that's it. And it's kind of a matter of, slow, painful practice on the hard stuff. And again, to be fair, you're already doing great. So you're on the right track, and I love to see it. So hopefully that helped a little bit. And again, thank you for the donation. All right. Ready for the next one. Thank you so much, Sumin. Real quick, we're about at the hour mark here. And again, I'm happy to keep going. We're going to go for 2 hours, bare minimum. And I'm happy to go longer if there's enough of a crowd donating. I am also, more than happy to do another one of these if we need to. But if you're just tuning in, Sajjad, 1994. Sajjad Ahmad, great guy from Pakistan, longtime GMAT club moderator, administrator, just phenomenal community member. I think has made more than 10,000 posts. If you've done much reading comp on the forum, Sajjad's behind it. He is the greatest cheerleader and energizer bunny in the history of the reading comp section of the forum. Amazing work. Does a lot more on reading comp for you guys than I do. You just might not notice it. So grassroots effort. He is in Pakistan. He's in South Punjab, in a city called Multan, which is the largest city in South Punjab. He and his friends are going around to the flood affected areas. 33 million displaced people in Pakistan. They are in the community, finding families that need help, and they are driving a mini truck around and distributing that help. So that's where your money's going. I 100% trust Sajjad. They are not wasting this money. It's not going to some big NGO that has a whole bunch of overhead. It's a bunch of guys on the ground in Pakistan. So it's on the screen here, but please donate via super chat. You can come back over to the forum if you want to donate a larger amount. That is absolutely wonderful too. And for the rest of this hour, I'm going to prioritize the questions that are popping up in the super chat. And our team, India, Pakistan, Ukraine, are compiling the questions and serving up the ones from the donors. So I will keep on trucking through. We'll do my best to answer everything. And again, if you can't donate, we totally understand. But every little bit helps for sure. And for those of you in parts of the world where a little bit of money goes a long way, you understand, you can, a few bucks in Pakistan, you can buy something that really makes a difference for a family. So even a couple bucks helps, a couple pennies helps. And if you have friends that are studying for the GMAT, please ping them, send them a PM, send them a text, whatever, have them come join us. All right. Kanishk, and again, apologies as always for my pronunciation errors. LSAT, CR typing and accuracy, additional, ooh, this is a lot. Additional resources for sentence correction. I'm going to defer that to the mountains of stuff we have on the forum. So we have I have a post on the forum, probably pretty easy to find. It's in my signature. Resource compilation, your complete resource guide for sentence correction. Tons of videos in there. I would start there, and pretty much everything that I've ever wanted to say about sentence correction, I've said on the forum, said on YouTube. It's all in there somewhere. Yeah, timing for verbal section and CR specific. Okay, LSAT CR. Let me talk about that because that's actually a really good question. For those of you who haven't heard me say it before or are already using LSAT, if you're looking for a super, super high GMAT verbal score, I'm a huge, huge fan of LSAT. Quick version, I've got a lot of reasons why, but it's very, very much like the GMAT. The differences are mostly cosmetic. What we found over the 15 or so years I've been using LSAT with our private students correlates very, very strongly to your performance on the GMAT. Yes, cosmetic differences, we can split hairs, but fundamentally, if you're doing well on the LSAT, you're going to do well on the GMAT. And every LSAT section is roughly the same difficulty. There's some variation, but it's very, very minor. So it's wonderful data. If you go do 10 LSAT sections, let's say 5 reading comp, 5 critical reasoning, called logical reasoning on the LSAT, 5 and 5, 10 sections total. And you give me the times and you give me the number that you missed on each section. I know a ton about you right there. I know a lot about your process, your consistency, your ceiling, because every section is roughly the same difficulty. So if I'm seeing big swings in it, I know your process isn't consistent, for example. Now, if you're doing LSAT sections for critical reasoning or reading comp and you're taking the GMAT or the executive assessment for that matter, or the GRE, if you're doing those sections in under an hour, I'm happy. 55 minutes, I'm totally comfortable. But the LSAT is way more time pressure than the GMAT. Very, very different exam. So if you're doing those LSAT sections in 55 to 60 minutes or less, I'm happy. More importantly, I want to see consistent times. I want to see you doing the same thing every single time, especially when you're shooting for that 45. Which way am I pointing? 45 verbal. That is a heck of a score. That means you're missing, I don't know, 3 or 4 questions, maybe, depending on exactly what you miss. I mean, that is phenomenal on the GMAT, right? You can't miss very many and get that 45. So what I'd like to see on your LSATs there is probably around the 90% mark, pretty consistently. A little better than that would be nice, but I'd say 90% on the LSAT, and you got a shot at that 45 on verbal. But again, I'm looking for consistency as well. Timing for the verbal section, I set up. Yeah, I'd be careful with timing systems like that, kind of, because what can happen on verbal, your pacing shouldn't be 100% consistent. Because what if, for example, let's say you see 3 critical reasoning questions, and then your 4th question is reading comp, and it's the beginning of the passage, right? So you've got to read that whole passage before you can answer question number 4. So there's no way you're answering 3 critical reasonings in one reading comp, exactly one reading comp, right? The first one, have to read that passage in 8 minutes. It's just not going to happen. And my take on timing in general on verbal, and I realize it's a little bit counterintuitive and a little bit unorthodox, and there's plenty of test prep folks who disagree with me here. But the holy grail, especially when you're going for the super high score, is I want you to be so consistent all the time in your practice and so efficient that by the time you get to your test, you don't need some timing gimmick. You know how fast you are. You know how many questions you can do accurately and efficiently in your 65 minutes. Hopefully that's 36 questions. And that's it. You don't have to worry about the time. If it's less than that, that's okay. But here's the thing. If you start to set up these timing things on verbal, I need to do my sense correction questions in 75 seconds each. Well, number one, you're distracted when you do that. You're so busy looking back and forth to the time that you're not focusing on the task at hand, which is read the thing, focus on answering the question. So the timing stuff can distract you. More importantly, what are you going to do with it? So let's say you start falling behind. So let's say that you've got 4 questions per 8 minutes or whatever, 7.5 minutes, whatever it is. And you do the first 3 questions and you've taken 6.5 minutes. What are you going to do? You're just going to go racing through the 4th question and miss it. What if that's question number 4 and it's a question you're totally capable of getting right? So what can happen so easily with these timing mechanisms on verbal is you start rushing through, you get sloppy, you miss questions you're capable of getting right. You start making error. You're trying to save 15 seconds, 30 seconds, and you start missing questions. It's not worth missing a question you're capable of getting right to save yourself 30 seconds. It just isn't. And remember, adaptive tests, you miss easy ones. That's when you put yourself into a hole. That's when your results get really erratic. So I generally don't recommend stuff like this. If it somehow gives you peace of mind, sometimes it can be okay. But really the holy grail on verbal, if you're going for that super elite score, is just get to the point where you're so consistent all the time that we see what you do every time. And it is, you're going to be able to get through those 36 questions. And as long as you keep doing things the same way you've always been doing them, it's not an issue. And even if you're a little bit slower than that, we had a student, one of my favorite examples, this is years ago now. This is back when the verbal section was longer. It was 41 questions back then. This guy could do 36 questions in the time he was given. That's it. He couldn't do 41. He could do 36, but he could do it very consistently and very accurately. So his instructions going to the exam, do what you do those 36 questions really, really consistently. That's it. And when you run out of time, when you see that you have 45 seconds left, just dial down the center. I think his wife's name began with the letter E. So we said, okay, picky on those last 5. That's it. Got a great score. Went to Wharton, lived happily ever after, has a couple beautiful kids. It's all good. You can miss questions at the end. It's not the end of the world. That's okay. As long as they're hard questions, take care of business on the first. Again, the test is shorter now. Take care of business on the first 33 questions. And if you're running out of time on the last 3, that's okay. Focus on your process, get consistent, and you shouldn't need any timing gimmicks on verbal. That's really my point. All right. Thank you so much for the question. Thank you for the donation. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, you guys. Thank you for the love, and thank you so much for the donation. How to improve and identifying the meaning. Hard. Yeah, hard. There's no easy answer here. We try to focus on this in really videos for all 3 of these. It's certainly not the first one I've done. I probably had maybe 3 different videos over the years on meaning and sense correction. One probably 5 years ago here on GMAT Club. I'm pretty sure I talked about it during the Ukraine Marathon in March. Just released a fresh one on the GMAT Ninja channel. It's practice and it's really learning how to be granular. Sense correction in particular. Yes, eliminate what you can off of mechanical stuff. And then as you're looking at those last 2 choices, try to find every little difference and go, okay, if I'm literal, not going off of instinct or feel or sound or how would I write it? Nobody cares how I would write it. How exactly does this change the meaning? And it's just one of those skills you develop over time, and it's tough. It's a really tough thing. So I wish I had something better for you. I think good process, critical reasoning, for example, good process helps, where we say, okay, I want you focusing on structure first. So, okay, if there's a conclusion, find it. Their words are my words. How did they get there? Their words are my words. I'm not going to do that in detail here. Got a ton of videos on it, on critical reasoning. Reading comp, same idea. I want you to really fight for purpose. What's the author really saying in this paragraph? When you're doing kind of those broad techniques and you're doing them well, over time, it's going to help you get better at identifying meaning. But sometimes this is about reading skill. Sometimes you haven't done a lot of reading. We've had students before who said, I don't think I've read 10 full books in my life. Okay, we got an uphill battle here. If you're a non-native speaker, yeah, maybe there's work to be done. Maybe there isn't. Maybe that's not a problem. And it's just a question of how you read, because this is an unnatural way to read on the test, right? You shouldn't be reading comprehension on the GMAT the same way you're going to read a novel in real life or a report from work or a news article. So some of it is just getting better at this task. And I wish I had something better to say here, but yeah, I mean, this is one of the core things that determines whether you can get that super elite verbal score. And sometimes it can be baked in a little bit in terms of your reading skills that take a long time to improve. And sometimes it's just, getting your process a little bit better and just practicing and practicing and practicing. And I wish there was a sexier answer, but that's most of it, unfortunately. Adi, thank you again. Great to see you again. Can official guides be recommended as a sole resource? Yeah, and I think we kind of addressed the study plan thing for 2 months, and there's not really a clean answer. I think I kind of gave the general guidelines on that. Can official guides be the sole? I'd put it this way. I think the holy grail, the absolute best thing that can happen, is all you need is official questions to practice with. You need no other official resources. That includes the practice tests, maybe the official question banks at MBA.com and the official guides. If that's enough for you, great. Perfect. That's what we want. That's ideal, because there is no substitute in terms of the quality of the practice questions, no substitute for official stuff, without a doubt. I think whether it's enough by itself has everything to do with what your weaknesses are. So if you can kind of, your skills are already really good and you can kind of go through the official guides and learn on your own from just doing questions, awesome. That's great. Then that's all you need. If you kind of go, whoa, wait a minute, I suck at percents questions, yeah, better go find a resource. So Buñuel, absolute legend, on GMAT Club. He has a whole bunch of resources. There's all kinds of threads. All you need for Quant is the name of one of them, I believe. There's a Quant resource mega thread that he has. Go find some of his resources. Go find videos from whoever, whatever company you like. I've got videos on percents. Tons of other great companies do too. If the Quant foundations are an issue, there's tons of different programs you could go do verbal as well. So I would say, totally fine to start with the official guides. Beyond that, I'd say for practice questions, keep in mind, GMAT spends more than $3,000 developing every single question. There's just a massive process of testing and editing and discarding questions. Test prep companies can't compete. Verbal, don't use non-official questions for practice. LSATs are great if you need critical reasoning reading comp. For Quant, you can use non-official stuff. Just keep in mind, it's not going to feel exactly like the real thing. Practice tests aren't necessarily accurate unless they're official. So keep all that in mind. But I think it's great to start with the official guides and kind of go, okay, what weaknesses do I see in my data? Now let me go looking around for a resource that fits. And again, plenty of great stuff out there. And, plenty of people can ask on GMAT Club. They can recommend what worked for them. Thank you so much for the question. Thank you yet again for the donation. No questions. You're awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm tempted to pronounce your name the way we would in Spanish, Tejas, and that is probably not it, Tejas. And again, huge apologies for the pronunciation issues I'm having. And thank you so much for this. This is amazing. And thank you everybody for supporting. And thank you for that as well. And this is exactly what we want to see. For those of you from that part of the world, India and Pakistan have one heck of a history. We don't care about that history here. People are people. Got people suffering. Let's support them. So thank you so much. Thank you, James. Really appreciate all of this, you guys. And once again, all of your donations, totally grassroots. Sajad and his buddies are literally, they're out driving around in flood affected areas, helping families directly. So your donations go to purchasing supplies, food directly for families, go straight to the families. No middlemen, no NGO, no bureaucracy, no overhead. Very, very rare opportunity to help with something like that. Where to pause? That it's funny. That's interesting to see that question referenced here because just did a video on it. So thank you again, Kanishk. And apologies again for pronunciation issues. How do you know David using is continuous and you don't have to pause? I'm not totally sure what you're asking here. Is it, how do you know that David using is continuous? I think you might be referring to the continuous, what's called a progressive tense, sometimes called a continuous verb tense. I think, and I'll try to keep an eye on the chat and if you have a clarification here. But I think if we say something like David is using something. This is, again, oops, I need to point that up a little bit. I don't care that much about the jargon, so don't worry about that part of it. Progressive tense, sometimes called a continuous tense. This one happens to be present, is using. So this is kind of suggesting an ongoing action, or in this case, something that's happening right now. When would, and I don't know if this is quite your question, Kanishk, but when would you use this? Let's say David is using a plaster model to create a painting, let's say, versus David uses a plaster model to create his painting or create a sculpture, whatever. When would you use this? When would you use this? It's stylistic. I wouldn't overthink that. Very, very rare that this distinction matters a whole lot on the GMAT between continuous and not continuous. These are both present tense. I wouldn't overthink it. Now, the other thing that could be going on here, and again, I'm a little bit murky on the exact question. And yeah, no worries at all from the last video. Yeah, and I guess the continuous part, I guess the other thing that you could be saying here, this could be a modifier. I'll do it this way, actually. So here it's a modifier, right? So I think we have a whole video from back in the day, certainly an article, maybe both. I can't quite remember, on ing words. I know there's one on the GMAT Ninja channel. Pretty sure I did a much longer one on GMAT Club maybe 5 years ago, where it's like, okay, here that ing is a progressive tense verb, present in this case. When would you use this versus this stylistic choice? Here, just be careful. This is a modifier. It is not a verb. Sounds like a verb, but it isn't. This is just modifying what comes after. So it's going to tell us more about the following clause or the following subject. Has to make sense with the subject. Is David the one using the plaster model to create a sculpture? Sure. And yes, I'm aware that you're asking about the Michelangelo question in the OG, but I'm not exactly sure what is about the continuous and the pausing. Could you go ahead and actually tag me on the video on our channel? Or you don't have to tag me, but just put a comment there, or tag me on the forum on the Michelangelo question, and I'll hop in and answer this in more detail because I appreciate your questions here. But I think I'm barking up the wrong tree. I know you're referring to the Michelangelo question. I'm not sure about the continuous part. So tag me and I'll take care of you either place, YouTube or GMAT Club forum. All right. And thank you again for yet another donation. Great profile picture, by the way. That's fantastic. Mine is nowhere near that good. I'm eating food. No, thank you, Sajad. And this, by the way, this is the man of the hour. Huge heart, takes care of people on GMAT Club. He's the one that's organized all this. So from South Punjab, he's the one walking around with his buddies, getting donations, running around the truck, taking care of families. So thank you for doing all this. Thank you, Adi. Huge appreciation. And Kanish, please don't be embarrassed. It's hard to formulate questions on this stuff, so please don't feel bad. All right. Who's next? Oh, okay. We're back to this. Cool. Okay. So we're done with all the, sounds like we're done with all the super chats. Okay. So I've got one more on the slides here. So this was one that was asked ahead of time on the forum. So once again, so we got 40 minutes left. I think we're running out of the super chats. So keep hitting those. If there's something you want to have answered, please make a little donation to Sajad's efforts for flood relief in Pakistan, and I will prioritize those questions. This was the final of the questions asked in advance. And I'll address the member question. Tell you what, I'm going to do this kind of the way we normally do it in these videos. I'll give you guys 2 minutes. Go ahead and pop your answer into the chat because I'm curious to see what you come up with, or any questions that come up for you. And then let's do the question pretty quickly and try to specifically address the member question about had and the time marker. So go ahead and take 2 minutes, guys. All right, if you're watching this later, not sure if this is going to be evergreen content here, but on the off chance you're watching this later, feel free to hit the pause button if you need more time to think about this. But everybody else, I'll rifle through this pretty quickly. And again, if you have more questions after this, I think we've beaten the snot of this on the forums, but so I'm going to go through it pretty quickly and try to address the members' question about this. So biggest things that jump out to me here, a whole bunch of different things you can play with. I'm going to address the verb tense thing last, actually. So one thing that catches my eye, parallelism here, I've got the and, so kind of right in the middle of that underline portion. What's it followed by an A? And that the policymakers remain concerned. So the Federal Reserve announcement said that X and said that Y. Okay, no problem there. And then the other thing that catches my eye, you've got few versus little. Are there few signs or are there little signs? Signs is countable, few is countable. Little doesn't really make any sense here. If we're talking about little signs, we're talking about very small signs, so a little tiny stop sign the size of a thumbnail. Few signs means that we don't have very many signs of something. So in this context, this is definitely what we want. It's not to say that little, you can't say little signs. Of course you can. It's just we're saying that they're tiny. We're talking about size when we use little with a countable noun. So with that in mind, just taking care of the countable, non-countable issue first, I'm going to wipe out everything with little. So that takes care of C and D. Parallelism. So B and E here. Growth had accelerated. Notice there's no that at the beginning of B. The and is followed by that the policymakers remain concerned. But we need to say that growth. The Federal Reserve announcement said two things. That something occurred and that something else occurred. And we're missing the first that. So parallelism is very much broken. Nothing is parallel to the that phrase after the and. So B's out. And again, I know I'm going pretty quickly here. If you have questions about parallelism, done piles of videos on those here on GMAT Club. Go check those out if you need it. E, parallelism is fine. The few is fine. And now we can kind of focus on the other stuff. So in E, the growth accelerated after slowing, and that the policymakers remain concerned, even though there are a few signs. And then an A, had accelerated. So if I'm not mistaken here, that's your big difference here is the had accelerated versus just accelerated. And I'll say two things here. One is that, yeah, there's some wiggle room with verb tenses on the GMAT. I have a whole video on that from, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Check that out if you have deeper questions about verb tenses. But yeah, this business of had, what I want to see is if I see had accelerated, if I kind of draw this up as a little timeline, really what I want is some other, I'm going to say a moment or some sort of marker in the past, or maybe an action in the past that comes after this action. So this had accelerated, oops, and I split screen, got myself into trouble there. So some moment in the past, a moment or a marker or something. So had accelerated first and then ends at some moment in the past, right? So had accelerated until something happened, had accelerated and then something else occurred afterwards. It's also in the past, not the present. So what do we have here? What's your moment or your action in the past? Well, here it's the announcement, right? The announcement said. Does that make sense? Accelerated first, right? So the growth had accelerated. Then the Federal Reserve made its announcement in the past. And then they said in that announcement also if they remain concerned. Yeah, sure. And as you look at E, we don't have the had. So that growth accelerated after slowing and policymakers remain concerned. Not ideal. Growth accelerated and then they said, and so we don't have this clear timeline. This has to happen first. This has to be the first action. The announcement is the second action. So for that reason, I would definitely pick A over E here. Now the user's question and eliminate options with had. There are other questions that the time markers are present. I think I addressed that. I might not be 100% interpreting the question correctly, but this is basically why. Here's your later action in the past. So had accelerated first, said something later, all in the past. We're good there. All right. I hope that helped a bit. And again, if you have questions on this, feel free to tag us on the forum. And just as importantly, if verb tense or the countable, non-countable stuff is an issue, again, piles of videos, can come find them on the forum or here on the GMAT Club channel. So we've addressed kind of that specific process for parallelism, also addressed this process for verb tenses, also the whole business countable, non-countable, separate videos for each of those. So plenty of content if any of those particular bits are giving you trouble. And if this Federal Reserve question is giving you trouble, just Google it. You'll find us on GMAT Club. All right. I saw a question flash up. Mock tests. Yes. Bhavya, thank you so much for the donation. That great question. And I'm giggling every time somebody asks me one of those general questions because they're hard to answer. I mean, they're great questions, right? And I laugh because they're wonderful questions that are very, very difficult to answer because it depends on context. The honest answer is as many as you need, but it's a terrible answer. I'm going to assume here that if you're here and you're taking the time to watch long-winded Q&As with some random big-nosed dude in the United States, you're probably looking for a big improvement. You're probably dedicating yourself to the GMAT process, I would imagine. So I'm going to assume that you have a long ways to go. Maybe that's 60 points, maybe that's 100, maybe that's 200, I don't know, but significant, right? So chances are, if that's the situation, and you're going to have a fairly long, hard road, months of study, maybe quite a few months, I don't know, then yeah, you're going to do all of those official MBA.com tests at some point, right? It's almost impossible to imagine that you wouldn't. Now, if you're killing it, there are people who roll out of bed, do great on their first practice test, and they go, I got a 720, I'd like a 750, and they study for a little bit, go do one more, and they get a 750, and then they go take the test. Good for them. Those guys probably aren't watching. I'm guessing you're not one of those if you're here asking and engaging with the community here. So the way I think about it in general, certainly for our private students, is we're going to use those 6 official tests really, really carefully and thoughtfully. And maybe we use one in the beginning to sort of get a sense of your level, get a baseline, makes it easier to kind of talk about how far you have to go. That's a good reality check, good sanity check. And then I'm going to very, very carefully use the remaining 5 up until test day. Maybe you hold a couple back in case you need to retake. But that is one, I think, really important kind of general principle. Use those tests very, very carefully. Those tests are checks on your progress. And yes, they're important practice, but you are not learning reading comprehension or sentence correction or ratios or rates or percents from those tests. That is not what they're for. You take a test, you identify your weaknesses, you work on those weaknesses. When you think you've made enough headway that you think your score is very different, go take another test. Now, what we get into from there is, what if 6 tests isn't enough for you? I think that gets really, really hard. I think practice tests are great for Quant, GMAT Club practice tests. A few other companies out there that have pretty good ones. Those are great for managing your time and your stress and your energy. Unless you walk on water and swim on air, you're not going to answer all 31 Quant questions as carefully as you'd like in the time allotted. It's really, really hard to do. There's some worders out there that can do it. I'm not even one of them. The test gets harder, right? If I'm doing my job and I'm doing well, those questions get vicious, and they get vicious fast. And I am pinched for time. And I've been doing this for 20 something years. That's just reality. They get hard. And I realize there are probably people smarter than me that don't feel that way. But hey, I've got to fight for every minute of those 62 minutes. So yeah, I need to get used to managing that feeling of getting hit in the face repeatedly. I need to learn how to let go of questions in all likelihood. Something's giving you trouble. It's not worth 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes. Don't get stubborn. Let it go. Focus on the stuff that you know how to get right. The key on the GMAT, key to maximizing your score, get the stuff right you know how to handle. Don't beat yourself. No careless errors. So non-official Quant tests, GMAT Club tests for Quant, I think really, really good for that. Verbal, be very, very careful. It is so hard to really mimic the style of the test. I think non-official verbal questions, and I've written plenty of them over the years, don't use them. Honestly, I don't recommend them. I don't think they're good for you. For verbal, yeah, try to focus on other things. It's okay to redo mock exams if you need to, the official ones. Just be aware that the data is not going to be as good. You got 6 shots at getting great data from them. Use those really, really carefully. 6. I can count to 6. So use those very, very carefully. There's no hard and fast rule. Exactly how many should you do? If you need more for Quant to kind of get better at timing, wonderful. Don't take the scores too seriously if they're non-official. Really, really hard. Again, GMAT is sinking tens of millions of dollars into this test so that it produces accurate scores. It's really hard for test prep companies to copy that. So take your mock test with a grain of salt if they're non-official. Use those 6 extremely carefully. Maybe those 6 is all you need. Maybe those 6 plus some extra Quant is all you need. That would be the hope. If you need more than that, yeah, in all honesty, I mean, the choices get not ideal, because you've got to find a way to cobble something together from non-official tests and redos, and it's not ideal. But yeah, that's my bad answer to your question. Hopefully no more than 6 and some extras for Quant, and that's okay if that's the case. All right. Thank you so much for the question, the donations. About 20, what do we have? About 25 minutes left here. Once again, grassroots effort. One of the great guys of the forum, Sajjad Ahmad, Sajjad 1994 on the forum, your hero of reading comprehension. If you've improved reading comprehension, you thank that guy. All those questions, all those different events. That's Sajjad all the time. Energizer Bunny. He and his friends in South Punjab and in Pakistan, they're walking around the flood affected areas, finding families that need it, distributing aid directly. No middlemen, no bureaucracies, no BS, no garbage, no waste. This is a guy I 100% trust. So please donate. You are helping families directly when you do so. Donate here via the super chat. Super thanks, all that kind of stuff that goes on the chat on the live feed. If you're watching this later, or later on you go, man, that was cool, wanted to get more money, come see us on the forum. And you can donate directly through the GMAT Club system. Money goes straight to Sajjad and his guys, and he's providing accounting to us as well. So your money will be used well. I 100% promise it, and way more efficiently, directly, effectively than if you just write a random check to some random organization. So your chance to really make a difference in the community directly, wherever you might be in the world. And especially, I realize that kind of time of day here, most of the folks in the US and Europe, I imagine a lot of our audience right now is in Asia. Hey, if you've got friends in Europe, United States, Canada, wealthier countries in the West, who might be at work right now or partying on a Friday night, hit them up, send them a message and say, hey, we don't always get the opportunity to help directly in places like this. We send money to big organizations and hope it goes to the right place. If you've got friends that like to donate to causes like this, please ping them, send them a message, tell them what you think of all this. Sajjad is very responsive on the forum. You can reach out to him directly. And he can tell you more about how the money is being used. So if you have friends that like to make a difference, like donating to causes, and are in places where, it's hard for us to reach directly into a place like, flood-torn Pakistan, it's a great opportunity to make a difference and really have your donations help. So ping your friends, please. All right, back to the questions, 25 last minutes. If you have anything you want me to answer, please punch in a donation, super chat, super thanks, and I will prioritize those. How frequently should one take mock tests? Yeah, this is good segue, Adi, because it's actually kind of really I sort of answered this on the last one. The bad answer is as often as you need to, but they should be more as checks on your progress. They are not a tool for getting better at percents or ratios or sentence correction or critical reasoning. You should do that heavy lifting on your homework, official guides, LSATs, practice sets. You want to get better at percents. Maybe you can pull a practice set from any number of test prep companies off the GMAT Club forum. Buñuel's produced all kinds of amazing questions over the years. That's where you do the heavy lifting. That's where you learn and you get better. You track your data, and then mock tests are for adding time pressure and seeing if you can execute, seeing if anything comes loose, if there's something where you didn't improve as much as you thought you did. So I like to think of it as cycles of do a mock exam, do a practice test to get your level, preferably an official test if you can. Just be careful. There's only 6 of them. Be really, really careful with them. Work on the things that the test tells you to work on. Come back, see if it worked. That's how I want you to use them. Closest to the actual GMAT, that's a really hard thing. Verbal, the answer is just no. Unfortunately, there really is nothing out there that's anywhere close. And it's terrible because there's a lot of wonderful people that put piles and piles of effort into it, and brilliant test prep folks that have done that. And at the end of the day, it's like, those verbal tests, they're just still so far away. I never assign those to our students. You need the time pressure, okay, I guess, but boy, it's really hard, and it's so hard to mimic on verbal exactly what the test is doing. Quant, it's hard too, but at least on Quant, the right answer is the right answer. And when you try to create a verbal question in the style of the test, they become subjective really quickly, and it's a mess. So for Quant, there's only so many other mock tests out there. I mean, there's I don't think Veritas's are available. I mean, and I apologize, I'm probably going to leave somebody out here, but the ones we see people doing the most often, GMAT Club, Quant test, top of the list. The hand of the legend Buñuel is all over those. They're a hard workout. Some of those questions are hard. So they give you a really good workout. Are the scores accurate? They're never perfect on non-official tests. So always, 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 non-official Quant test, verbal test, doesn't matter. Non-official test, take the score with a grain of salt. But are you learning from it? Are you making unforced errors? Are you managing your time well? Are you getting stubborn? Those are the kind of questions you want to ask. Does it reveal a weakness? that you can address. Hey, I missed a bunch of percent questions and they didn't look that hard. Maybe I got to go back to the drawing board and do some work. So that's how I want you to use them. GMAT Club, top of the list. Others that are out there, Manhattan, I don't think Kaplan's are available anymore. I think Magoosh still has some tests out there, Experts Global, and maybe in the chat you guys can weigh in on any others. I'm probably forgetting some, but yeah, they can be really good for practice. How often should you do them? As often as you need to, but don't maniacally, obsessively, compulsively do practice tests. That's missing the point. Let your test tell you what to work on. Go work on it. Come back and verify that you learned enough to improve. That's how you should use them. Shouldn't be super, super frequent. You kick up the frequency a little bit more as you approach your exam early in the process if you have real work to do. If you go and you get a 25 verbal, your goal is a 40. Yeah, you don't need a practice test for a while. You got to spend a lot of time getting better. And I know it's unsatisfying. We'd love to see the score, but there are only so many good practice tests out there. So be really careful about how you use them. All right. Oh, wow. That's wild, Sajad. Okay, so check that out. So this is what these guys are doing so that your donations and your aid reach the right place. They're walking 5 or 6 kilometers for anybody in places that use miles, 3 or 4 miles. So that's probably hour and a half, 2-hour walk to get to the affected areas. That's rough. So again, these guys are going the extra mile to help people. So if you can afford a donation, please do it. Wonderful to see you again, Kanish. And I hope I have not been mispronouncing your name the whole time. What's the most efficient way to attempt CR questions? Gaps in the stem, or jump straight to the choices? Yeah, this is another one of those super, super broad questions. And I'm going to feel back, so I'm going to not blow it off exactly, but refer you elsewhere because this is way more than I can answer in, we have 19 minutes left here on the live stream. So we have videos on all of these. And I would start with, so if you go to, for example, so I've got a thread in my signature, all of the GMAT Ninja videos on the GMAT Club channel. You could start there. For almost all of those, we have kind of, certainly for verbal, a general video that's, hey, how do you approach critical reasoning? More of those on the GMAT Ninja YouTube channel if you'd like. And I would start there because the Ukraine marathon, I might have gone through these steps for every single question type. Problem solving and data sufficiency, not necessarily a super different process, but I guess some tweaks on there. But yes, I've talked about these quite a bit in videos, I guess is my point. Ukraine marathon, I think I talked about all of them. Other videos I've talked about, certainly all the verbal ones, probably Quant as well at some point or another. So I would check those out and no, you're not jumping straight to the choices. You need to spend the time analyzing the passage. No doubt about that. Get your head around it first. If you jump too fast to the answer choices, or if you start imagining gaps in the stem, that makes me nervous. Hey, I'm going to decide what I think the answer choices are going to be. That doesn't always work out very well. You need to take some time and make sure you really understand the structure of the argument. And again, our critical reasoning videos get into that in more detail. Same with sense correction, reading comp, and so on. So I'll refer you back over to those so I don't end up talking for 6 hours. All right. The full question, any tips for grammatical construction? Yeah, there's a lot of nuance to this question. It's actually kind of great. So thank you for this, and thank you for the donation once again. Sense correction questions, real GMAT felt very different. Oh yeah, this is great. So bunch of layers to this before I even really get to the meat of your question. Grammatical construction questions. So one of the things you see in the official guide, and you also see kind of in your ESRs for the GMAT, is kind of these distinctions of like, well, this question is about logical predication. What's that? I don't know. It's been in the official guide for decades, and I still don't know what logical predication is or how I would train somebody in it. Grammatical construction. Yeah, I mean, you should understand parallelism and sentence structure enough that you can identify a run-on sentence or a comma splice or those kinds of things, right? That we talk about in all the videos and all over GMAT Club, right? Those really kind of that core of maybe 8 or 10 or 12 things, modifiers, modifier placement, comparisons, subject-verb agreement, right? I mean, all these things that kind of get tested over and over and over. Yeah, you should have a good grounding in that. So if you're missing those tips proportionally, it's possible that some of those foundations are missing, right? That's possible. Kind of more importantly there, though, is that I think GMAC's distinctions are really arbitrary, and I don't think they mean very much. And that goes for Quant too. And, to whatever extent you're referring to kind of those chunks of the ESR, those chunks of the official guide, I get a little nervous that there's not a lot there, because there's such a blurry line. I wouldn't say there are no questions that are purely grammatical on the GMAT. They're just very rare. And if you're shooting for a really high score, let's say that your goal is to get 40 or above on verbal, yeah, the grammar is only going to take you so far. And really what you're going after on sentence correction is, yes, can you master the grammar and the usage and the kind of rule-based stuff? Find those definite errors, those concrete errors, find a parallelism error, find a countable, non-countable noun error. Yeah, that stuff's important. It matters. That's what makes you efficient. Helps you get the easy answers. But most questions are going to blend some amount of mechanical stuff, grammar stuff a little bit with meaning. And there are very few questions you can look at and say, this is purely grammatical construction. GMAT labels it that way, or the official guide labels it that way. I don't love the label. I think it cheats you a little bit as test takers, because it's like, yeah, that's a skill, but that skill is blended into nearly all sentence correction questions. So is the skill of thinking about meaning. Those skills are blended in almost every question. So yes, you might be missing some foundations there. Totally possible. It's also possible that kind of your question is rooted in something I don't love that GMAT does, which is labeling these questions in a way that I think is too simplistic and doesn't really cut to the heart of what your brain is doing when you try to answer them effectively. So I hope that helps a little bit on that one. Sentence correction questions in real GMAT felt very different, I assume, than on your practice tests. And I'm going to assume that using official sources, right? So it felt very different than official guide, verbal guide, MBA.com practice tests. I'm going to assume that. Obviously, if you're doing non-official sentence correction questions, of course, they're going to feel different. And this is such a rich question. And again, I don't know exactly what's going on for you as an individual, but a couple things that could be going on here. One is, yeah, you can kind of study a ton of the easier questions. So when I pick up the official guide, and those questions in theory range in difficulty from 200 to 800 level, right? So if I go and I do that whole batch of questions, and let's say that you're really, really good. Let's say that you're a guy who's going to score in the 90th percentile. You're going to get a 40, 41 verbal, let's say. Well, how many of those questions are really going to be a challenge? Some 20%, 30%, maybe you're at the level you're going to see on the exam. The other 70, 80% are easier, right? Kind of by definition, if you're doing really well, the questions are going to feel harder. They just are. Because, yeah, on average, the questions are harder than what you see in the official guide. So very, very possible that's a lot of it. That's one factor. Factor number two, and this is more subtle and it's really, really hard to put your finger on, because I've heard this from test takers for as long as I've been teaching test prep, 20 plus years. Hey, the test felt different. The test felt no, I swear it's different. I swear they've changed the test. I swear they've changed the test. No, they didn't change the test. Couple factors here. A very, very, very minor factor is, yes, there are experimental questions on the test. So verbal, I think I said this earlier, 36 questions total, 30 count towards your score, 6 are experimental. Possible some of those are a little bit goofy and will not pass testing. They won't ever make it into the actual exam as a scored question. So that's a small factor, right? A sixth of your questions on verbal are experimental. So yeah, possibly you saw 1 or 2 that were goofy. But here's the bigger factor that I see over and over again. And it's really hard to know if this is the case for you, but I want you to think about it. If you're stressed out, you're having a rough day, your brain's starting to glitch because you're nervous, you're getting intimidated, you're getting tired on test day, everything feels hard. And something I hear from people not infrequently, especially people who have test anxiety, is, yeah, I took the test and yeah, I know all the grammar, I'm great at it. And I might already know that about them, right? If it's one of my students, I'll be like, hey, you've mastered this stuff. You're great with parallelism and pronouns and modifiers and comparisons and subject verb tenses, all those kind of fundamental core mechanical usage grammar things that we teach. And I'll say, yeah, you're great at it. I never see you make a mistake at it anymore. I'll say, I didn't see any on my test. All my sentence correction questions, I didn't see any parallelism. Like, sorry, buddy, it was there. It was there. I promise it was there. Parallelism was there. Guarantee it. I can't guarantee that something more granular was there, but parallelism, you bet, it's always there. Pronouns, they were there. Guarantee it somewhere. If you weren't seeing them, that was you, right? Something was going on in your head. You were locking up. You were getting a little bit paralyzed. You were getting nervous. You weren't focused in the right ways. And it is so easy to do that. You don't have to feel consciously nervous for your brain to be a little bit off on test day, and you just don't see the things you normally see. You're reading too quickly. Again, I have no idea if that's the case for you. I can guarantee that there are people watching for whom this is the case. You feel different on test day. You're a little bit nervous. Maybe you're trying to go too fast, or you're getting too fine grained. You're going, I'm going to squeeze every little drop out of the sentence correction. and you're doing different things than you did in your practice. And then you're just not going to see the things you normally see. And it's going to feel like a totally different exam. It's incredibly common. That's the case for you. Be honest with yourself and see if there's something you could do to help out with the anxiety or the fatigue or distraction or whatever on test day. And again, I have no idea if that's the case for you, but I can guarantee there are people watching for whom that's the deal. Okay, hope that helped a little bit. 10 more minutes. If you have any more questions, again, we're going to prioritize donor questions. If we have other questions and we're out of donors, feel free to fire away. Yep, perfect. Thank you, Nikhil. Charles, I'm at 6:30. I need to go to 6:80. Yeah, this is a really common sort of thing. Sorry to hear verbal's giving you so much trouble. Harshil, and again, apologies for the pronunciation issues as always. Yeah, I think with the official mocks exhausted, the kind of road I would go down here, and I'm going to assume that you've already done a pretty deep dive into sentence correction. There's not a ton left there for you. What I'd like to see you do, you're going to struggle on LSATs if 27 is really a reflection of how you're doing. But I guess two things I'd like you to do. One is really dive into your data. Where are you seeing inconsistency? Is this an efficiency issue? Are you performing differently on different days? If you are, it could be a sign of test anxiety or something, but more likely a sign that your process just isn't systematic enough. If that's the issue, spend some time, really take the sort of things we say in our videos to heart and go, okay, critical reasoning, for example, how can I be more systematic, put this into practice in a really methodical way? So that's one part. Be data-driven. If there's inconsistency in your results, it comes from inconsistency in process. Focus on your process. See if that can get you better. How can you get good data once you've already exhausted the official mocks and probably done a lot of the official guide stuff already? Yeah, I mean, LSAT's going to be one of your better tools. I know it's limited because there's no sentence correction, and it's also going to be really hard for you if that 27 is really a good reflection of your skills. You're going to get beat up. You're going to struggle. It's going to feel pretty miserable, but that's really, really good for you. And you want to look for that those two things you want to look for. Consistency over time. I want your times in the same range every time. I want your error count in the same range every time within a question or two. And you're looking for improvement. So as you do these and you try to apply the things we talk about in our videos for reading, comp, and critical reasoning, do you see improvement? So maybe your first few sets, you're ranging between -10 and -15, and your times range from 50 minutes to 70 minutes, erratic, inconsistent, not very good. Over time, do we see those ranges narrowing? Maybe you're between 50 and 55 consistently. Good, that's what we want to see. Maybe instead of 10 to 15, it's between 8 and 10. You're still going to feel terrible doing them because they're hard. But if you can kind of move the needle over time, that's a sign you've made enough progress that maybe when you go to that test room, it's going to be different. So that's where I would try to focus your energy. Again, sentence correction, keep fighting the good fight. There are other, if you're really scraping the bottom of the barrel for sentence correction, there's the official question banks in the MBA.com system. A lot of people forget about. And there's also some files that contain all of the questions in the first two free MBA.com practice tests. If you are 100% certain that you are not going to take those tests again, test number 1 and 2, MBA.com official tests, the free ones, then you can go on GMAT Club. There's links to banks that have all the questions in there. You could do those for extra practice, especially for sentence correction. Don't touch them unless you're sure you've exhausted those tests. You're never going to take them again. So that's my word of caution. That might help a little bit. All right. Thank you so much, TS. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for the support, everybody. Answer maybe one or two more questions. How to not go wrong in selecting the right option of the two filtered options. I think, and again, apologies if I'm misinterpreting your question. I think the question here is, you get down to 2 on reading comprehension or anywhere in verbal, right? Once you're down to 2, so I imagine here that what you feel like is happening, you get down to 2 answer choices and you keep picking the wrong one. What's happening there? Here's the terrible thing, terrible reality of verbal in particular, maybe to a much lesser degree quant. Here's the terrible reality. When you think about that person who's designing these questions at first, and again, they go through just a monstrous process of testing and vetting and statistical collections and all kinds of stuff, right? So it's not to say that somebody just writes the question and there it is on your test, not how it works. But that original kind of genesis of the question, I've got an idea for a really fair, really hard question. I'm probably imagining a right answer that maybe kind of looks wrong, but is right. and I'm imagining something else that's a really tempting, delicious wrong answer. That if you misread the passage just a little bit, you might pick that wrong answer. So again, no tricks, no gimmicks. There's none of that stuff. They're not out to trap you, but it's just, hey, if you're really reading this carefully, how do we make it hard? Well, we might kind of make this subtle distinction between two things, unambiguous that one is right and one is wrong, but you really have to pay attention to the passage, for example. So often what you have is there's a right answer, there's a really delicious, tempting wrong answer, and then they got to write 3 more because that's how the test works. So if you're struggling on verbal, it will very frequently be the case that you're down to 2 and you're struggling. That is kind of an inevitability of the test. How do you not go wrong at that point? That's really the same thing as everything else. That's just getting better at reading comp, right? So if you struggle between those last 2, you misread something or misinterpreted something somewhere, maybe in the answer choices, maybe in the question itself, very likely in the passage. So the terrible answer to your question, it's a great question, is that, yeah, getting better at picking between those last 2 is really about getting better in general at reading comprehension. And it's an awful answer, but over time, you're going to be down to 2 like that less often, or once you get down to 2, it's going to be easier for you to eliminate the wrong one as you just get stronger at catching exactly what you need to catch of the author's purpose, the overall structure of the passage, and get better at kind of close reading the details when you need to. So very, very, very unglamorous answer to your question, but this is inevitability. Basically, you will struggle on those last 2 to whatever extent you're struggling on verbal, and getting better at those last 2. It's just getting better in general. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for donation number 4, Kanishk. Do you recommend students record their attempts? Oh yeah. Well, best way to model error logs and track progress. Different people create their own error logs. Maybe one of the moderators monitoring the chat here can post one of the links from GMAT Club, because there's all sorts of error log systems out there, tons of them up on GMAT Club. Pick one that works for you. Pick one that works with your brain. A lot of my consultants and investment bankers, boy, they really get granular with it. They don't need to, and they customize the spreadsheets and they're programming macros and doing all this fancy stuff. You don't need that. But yeah, record everything, track your data. It is so priceless for our private students when we do tutoring. We give them a really basic spreadsheet. Every week is it's one tab on a Google sheet. It's really, really simple. I want times. I want number of questions. I want number of questions missed. Want to know what the set was. I want to know the date. And any thoughts they had, any notes, whatever that might be. And if we have somebody who's struggling and they get to week 7, week 8, week 12, it is so priceless to be able to go back and say, because we'll sometimes have students, I'll pick on critical reasoning reading comp again here. We'll say, oh man, I'm not improving on critical reasoning reading comp. I'm getting, this is so hard for me. And you get frustrated after a while and you go, I'm not where I want to be. And we can look back, even just on the simplest level, go back and say, yeah, look at where you were. You were missing 10 to 15. You were missing between 40 and 60% on every critical reasoning set. And now you're consistently missing only 30. You might still feel like garbage. Maybe it's not where you want to be. Maybe you want to be at 20% or 10% errors and not 30. But look at the progress, right? Sometimes progress is slow on some things. So for that reason alone, it's absolutely critical. I'm agnostic to the system. Lots of error logs out there, lots of good ones. But yeah, by all means, track everything, record everything. It's so much harder to get where you're going if you know where you've been. So yeah, track everything in as much or as little detail is helpful for you. Okay. I think this probably winds us to the end here. Okay, just checking the private comments here from our team internally. Thank you so much, everybody, for donations. Once again, if you have friends anywhere in the world, don't care where they are, don't care if they're studying for the GMAT, GRE, EA, whatever, please send them over to this link that's up on the screen right now, to the donation drive. Again, very rare that you have these wonderful opportunities to help very, very directly. So again, Sajjad, some of his schoolmates, some of his friends and colleagues, they are collecting money from all over the world. They are a few kilometers away from the flood affected areas. They're walking there because the roads are knocked out. They're walking, I think it was 5 or 6 kilometers to get to those areas. And they are finding families in need and helping them directly. So this is 100% grassroots, 100% hands-on. You can trust Sajjad. We've known him here at GMAT Club for years. Thousands and thousands of posts, heart of gold, there in Lower Punjab. So please donate if you have friends that are interested, and if you just have friends that just like to help people in parts of the world that are suffering. ping them, please. Send them an email, forward them the link to the GMAT Club, forward them the link to this if you think that wouldn't put them to sleep. Forward them the link to the YouTube recording here. And please do what you can to help out. And again, thank you everybody for watching. And please weigh on that forum thread. If there's enough demand, I'll do another one of these. I'm happy to. If there's still, I think the need in Pakistan is going to go on for a while. 33 million displaced people. I mean, it is an absolute catastrophe of massive proportions. I think the effects will be felt for quite a while. So if there's enough interest, I'm happy to do more Q&As as long as the demand is there and folks are willing to donate. So thank you everybody for watching. Ping Sajjad on the forum. You have questions for him, please ping him. He's one of the great responsive people on the forums, way better than I am. So if you have questions for him, questions for me, please find us on GMAT Club. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.